From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. And for you today during our first half hour, conversations with two more couples who will be formally inducted as Kansas Master Farmers, Master Farm Homemakers in ceremonies next Tuesday at the Kansas State Fair. Again, this is a recognition program co-sponsored by K-State Research and Extension. And today, the stories of Jay and Stacy Rezac of Pottawatomie County and Kevin and Vera Schultz of Edwards County. We'll have today's agricultural news for you further ahead, followed by this week's horticulture segment. K-State's Scott Eckert will talk about a different way of creating compost for home gardening purposes indoors during the fall and winter. It's called vermicomposting. All that here on Agriculture Today. You are listening to Agriculture Today, and thanks for being along with us. If you've been tuned in this week, you'll know that we are featuring, all week, profiles of the 6 couples who will be formally inducted in ceremonies next week as the 2020 class of Kansas Master Farmers, Master Farm Homemakers. The Longtime Recognition Program, co-sponsored by K-State Research and Extension and Kansas Farmer Magazine. To remind, these couples are selected to this honor based on their leadership in agriculture, environmental stewardship, and service to their communities. Here's another of their stories. Though they are lifelong residents of Pottawatomie County, Jay and Stacy Rezac didn't meet until their high school years. Both grew up in farming and ranching, and upon marrying in 1986 after graduating from Kansas State University, they launched right into their agricultural life together. Partnering with Jay's parents and brother, the Rezacs continued to build upon the family operations' success. Rezac Land and Livestock now runs 4,500 stocker and backgrounder beef calves per year, maintains a 900-head cow herd, operates a 400 sow farrow-to-finish operation, and farms 2,000 acres of row crops. Their 2 sons, Russell and Matthew, along with daughter Jamie and her husband Corey, are now all partners in this diversified operation.
Dad farmed and we farmed, grew up farming, ranching. You know, that's what my brother and me. In high school, we rented my grandpa's farm on my mother's side. And, you know, we've had an operation of a farming interest all of our lives. You know, Dad and Mom bought 6 gilts and a boar to get started. And my grandpa, he farmed with him a little bit, but he bought these gilts and a boar and moved into an old shacky farmstead. And so hogs made Dad a lot of money over the years, and we always had hogs. And then we always had some cattle and some row crops. And when my brother got out of college 3 years in front of me in 83, I got out in 86. So we formed up a partnership then, and things kind of took off, and we each kind of expanded in our own areas and grew the operation from there.
Was there ever any doubt in your mind you were going to be a farmer rancher?
Oh, no, I was going to do it. Matter of fact, in 1980, my dad asked me if I was going to go to college. I said no. I said, I'm going to come home and farm. There was a farm up the road for sale. And so he said, well, we'll buy that then. I said, all right. Well, no bank would loan me any money in 1980, a sophomore in high school. Thank goodness they didn't do that, because going to college and probably the way things went, that was a good choice.
Stacy, you grew up in an agricultural operation as well?
Yes. I grew up over by Oldsburg. My dad just had cattle. We just had cattle and hay. So the whole farming operation was a little new to me when we first got married. I wasn't used to the row crop or the hogs, but
you were used to at least part of it.
Yeah.
And in classic rural fashion, the two of you met at the county fair.
Yes.
We did.
Well, reflect on that a little bit.
Well, I tell everybody she picked me up at the county fair, but she says, don't you tell people that. But no, we just kind of met at the county fair, and I don't know, their senior year, so I ought to call her and ask her out, and I guess the rest is history. So
And you both went to Kansas State University?
Yeah.
And your degree was in?
Animal science.
And your degree was in?
Elementary education.
Which you followed through with as part of your career.
Yeah. Onega Grade School, yes. I taught there for 28 years and retired, and I stayed home for 2 years after that, and then I went to work at the local pharmacy, and I started out just being the clerk in the front, and I don't know how they talked me into things, but now I'm a certified pharmacy technician. So I enjoy it. It's good.
Jay, it seems as if this operation has never lost momentum. It has continued to expand in scope as well as in, general enterprises. What's been the philosophy in growing this place?
Well, my brother and me tells people we were just born at the right time. In the 1980s, the farm crisis was on. People, they went to school. They told you, don't come back to the farm. Go get a job in town. Me and my brother, we wanted to farm. We weren't going to town. And Dad saw that, and there was just readily available opportunities to grow the operation. We got married in 86. In 1988, he says, we're going to buy this 1,500-acre ranch right here next to us. I thought, holy smokes. Dad, what do you think? And that's a lot of money. But we bought that. We've never looked back. It threw us into the cattle business, and we just kind of kept going. But, we had opportunities. When opportunities arose, we took them and rolled with it.
So what has been the secret to succeeding with what some would look at and say as a very aggressive approach to expanding an operation?
Well, I think part of it is you got to be willing to take chances. If you can't go to sleep at night because you're too worried about the risk, I guess you probably shouldn't do it. And we are a very self-sufficient group here. I tell people we shoe our horses, or we get our horses shod, we get our silage chopped, and our hay ground. Everything else on this place we do ourselves. And that's part of, I think, the things that, you look around, you look at our buildings, you look at our pens, we build it all ourselves. We don't hire a custom crew to come in and do a turnkey anything. I think that's part of it, and like I say, taking the opportunities when they arose.
So how far-flung is Rezac? Well, there's Rezac Farms and there's Rezac Land and Livestock. Explain how that all works, and again, in partnership with your brother and now with the children.
Yeah, we started out with Dad and Mom, and we started out, and Rezac Farms is the entity that we buy land in, and because we started buying land, then Rezac Land and Livestock is really the entity that we do all the day-to-day business. The livestock's run through there, the crops, all that kind of stuff. Land and Livestock rents the farm from Rezac Farms. That keeps things separate, keeps things, you can keep track of things. We set things up. Dad was a smart businessman, and we set things up in the 80s. We had agreements to buy things out and set it up. Of course, then it was just Dad, Lance, and me, and we had one employee at that time. So when we got all of our kids back going, we actually hired a consultant to come out and help set some things up, and we've got buy-sell agreements and everything set up on shares. The kids that wanted in on the operation or have bought into the land and livestock on shares. So we're letting them now take it and go, see what they want to do with it.
Stacy, it seems, though, that everybody's role is fairly well defined within this whole operation because it has so many enterprises active at one time. Everybody knows what their lane is, so to speak, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And communication and working together.
So how do you facilitate that? What sorts of things do you purposely do to maintain the communication, maintain the interaction between the various enterprises?
Well, the guys are supposed to have monthly meetings, so I guess I get on his case about, have you had your meeting? You need to have your meeting so everybody knows what's going on. But yeah, just being there to support them and try to keep things straight.
And we've been in that, like you say, our own lanes, and because it is one operation, but yet, like I said, Lance doesn't ask me what bulls we're buying, and I really don't worry about what corn he's planting. We visit about the big stuff, the scope of things, but we're not nitpicking each other on, for buying this or doing that or selling this or whatever. We trust each other and we just go with it. Because the enterprise is, what we're focused on. So if it's good for the enterprise, it's should be good for everything.
Well, part of this recognition, of course, addresses your devotion to community as well as to your agricultural pursuits. And both of you are involved deeply in what's called the Caring Community Foundation, which encompasses several local smaller communities here in this area.
Yes.
What's that about?
Well, that was set up in 2015, and we're sitting here in the middle of Pottawatomie County, and there were foundations to the south of us and to the north of us, but it was kind of needing a foundation in this area. So things kind of picked up and started, and we've been going now for, I think it's 15, and it's done very well. We've got almost $2 million in assets now on different fund agreements, and I've been pleasantly surprised, but it's a way that the people in this community can give back to their community and help with different fund agreements and different activities and different grants to help the communities.
What are some of the projects that it's undertaken in its relative youth? It's only 6 years or so old.
Yeah, it's we got numerous scholarships in there, and then like the Rock Creek Endowment has been set up in that foundation, so that's helping that Rock Creek School District. Our grant cycles, we do grant cycles each year, and that's just depends. Like we've helped the Historical Society in Westmoreland, Onega, Havensville has the Living History Days. We've helped them buy some tents for that. We've helped some local veterans, some ladies that were doing making some quilts for local veterans. We've done that. It's just anything that's a community organization that we can help with, we try to help.
That's Jay and Stacy Rezac of Pottawatomie County. You'll meet another of this year's Kansas Master Farmer, Master Farm Homemaker couples next on Agriculture Today. Welcome back to Agriculture Today, the next of our features on the new Kansas Master Farmer, Master Farm Homemaker couples to be inducted next week at the Kansas State Fair takes us more toward the southwest part of the state. For Kevin and Vera Schultz, raising cattle has been their calling from the start. Kevin was raised on the family farm in southeastern Edwards County. He represents the 6th generation of Schultzes there. And Vera grew up on her family's commercial cow operation in the sandhills of Holt County, northern Nebraska. They met when attending Kansas State University, married in 1986, and immediately returned to eventually take over the polled Hereford operation that Kevin's grandfather founded in the 1940s, eventually developing Sandhill Farms into a leading registered herd. In fact, Kevin and Vera were named National Seed Stock Producers of the Year by the Beef Improvement Federation in 2010. Today, they run 400 registered polled Hereford cows, 150 purebred commercial cows, plus raise both dryland and irrigated crops, corn, wheat, and soybeans. Of their 3 children, Tyler and his wife Hannah are now full partners in Sandhill Farms.
I don't know where it came from, but I guess a passion, probably genetically, since that was what had happened on our operation since we homesteaded the location. So I guess, it was just a goal that wanted to make the cattle better and do what we could to provide that for other people, I guess.
You allude to it, but the Schultz family has extremely deep roots in this part of the country, Edwards County specifically, right?
Yes, currently Vera and I are the 6th generation, and our son Tyler and his wife Hannah, who are with us here full-time, are the 7th, and they have a couple little girls, so that'll be kind of exciting. But so yes, we're the 6th and 7th generation here since they homesteaded in 1869.
Always been cattle on the operation, presumably?
Yes, sir. I think Grandpa and his dad talked about, or I heard the stories of going loading cattle and taking them to Kansas City on the trains to market at the stockyards. And of course, with irrigation in the last 45 years, that's made a big impact on how we manage what we do. And I respect what those predecessors did in our sandy environment and doing it without irrigation and without water. I often think, I don't know if we could do it today without the technology of irrigation that I respect what they did, and they kept it going.
Took diligence, didn't it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Vera, you didn't grow up in Kansas, to the state to the north?
Right. I grew up in Nebraska, Sandhills in Nebraska, on a ranch there. So we just had cattle, no farming. So we put up hay in the summertime. Just four sisters. I had three sisters, so the four of us put up hay, and that was my childhood.
And as a kid, and even growing up, did you think you'd continue on a farm and ranch environment for the rest of your days?
Well, I didn't know if I was coming back there, but I hoped someday I'd be able to be. My love was ranching, but I also had a lot of, at first I thought maybe I'd be a home economist because I liked a lot of those things too, and children. So I was lucky to meet Kevin and be able to have an opportunity to have be on a ranch.
The two of you met at Kansas State University as students.
Yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm. What's the backstory there?
Well, I met him in speech class, and he was given a speech on how to polish his boots. I wasn't real impressed, but he asked me out several times, and I wasn't real sure. And finally, I went to a farmhouse barn party with him, and that was the beginning of it.
So you got together, you finished your degrees at Kansas State, and were married, and then right back to this operation. Is that the path?
Yes, sir. Yep. Yeah, we came back directly and started working with my folks, Ron and Arnita, and they provided opportunity and opening for us to kind of work into the operation with what we wanted to do with the cattle. Dad gave me the kind of the leniency to breed them and do what I wanted to do, and a lot of trial and error, and I respect him a lot for. I'm sure there was a lot of times he questioned what we were doing, but I respect him for letting us make the mistakes and learn from them and move forward.
This was in the 80s, mid to late 80s at that point. What were your goals back then as far as growing this cattle operation, or had you thought in terms of goals then?
Well, we started the registered part of it. It was commercial before that, so we started the registered operation.
We bought some cows on our honeymoon, so that was kind of the beginning of that. Well, actually, I had bought some bred heifers when we were in college, and then bought some added to that when we were coming home on our honeymoon, and yeah, I mean, there's always different faucets. It's kind of unique when you get into the cattle business. There's different avenues or profit drivers. We chose to be into the performance side of the cattle with trying to grow performance, carcass merit, kind of a complete program, and that was something, I guess, yeah, we just kind of, that was what we started, what we stuck with.
So you went the seed stock route, and that's your stronghold today, right?
Yes, sir. And the crops, it was kind of, through all the years, it takes a long time. For us to build our program and a reputation and the genetics that, well, I'm not sure we're not even where I would like to be in 10 years, but the crops and what Dad let us do with the farming kind of helped us stay in business. And when one side wasn't paying the bills, the other side kind of helped, and crops and livestock kind of worked together to grow it. Yeah.
At this point, polled Hereford, that is your breed of choice.
Yes, sir.
Your seed stock producers for that breed. And how many head are we talking right now?
We'll have over 400 registered females, progeny born this spring with the embryos. That we have two daughters, and they're both married, and they're both in agriculture production, and our oldest daughter Brooke and her husband Travis put in embryos for us, and so we actually probably be bigger than that number, but it's growing as the market grows, I guess.
You have a major production sale every year, right?
Yes.
Big undertaking, isn't it?
Yes, and that's a good time when all the kids come home to help and we get it all done. And yes, it's a thing we plan all year for.
And you sigh heavily when it's over, right?
Yeah, yes, used to think we would sleep better the day after, but the day after you're just wondering what happened and why things happened and what you can do different for next year, and so it's hard to sleep the day after also.
Well, Kevin, you are on the board of the Beef Improvement Federation, among other various roles here, so you are committed at that level and here on this operation to advanced genetics in the cattle industries. What excites you right now about that arena?
Oh, I don't know where to begin. It's the technology, the things that we can do today to understand genetic turnover and understand, years ago I was told if we could accurately predict how an animal will serve the new customer and what they will do accurately, that's the first leg in making a business out of it. And so the technology that we can use to more accurately predict an animal's genetic value at a younger age is really exciting, and it's getting younger all the time with technology.
So as the two of you look at what comes along next, what process do you go through to analyze this would be for us, this maybe not? You discuss a lot of these things?
Yeah, it's also kind of a challenge to know how to build our operations so that when the next generation, like our son who works with us, what his interests are, what he wants to add to it, and back off enough for him to have some ideas of what he wants to add and have something that he is ready for him to inherit. And so that's always a challenge to know what direction to head. It's not all about us.
You're involved in other things. We do want to mention those as well, beyond just the cattle operation. You have civic roles that you play, and leadership roles. And Kevin, you're involved in the groundwater management district. You've both been involved in extension work. So where do you find the time to squeeze all of those other things in?
Well, that's a good question. You just make a commitment and do it. When the kids were young, I was the community leader for 4-H, and it was always a challenge to get everything done. And we had a calendar, and we had something on. It seemed like every minute of every day, and you just do it and get it done, and it's worth it in the end.
Groundwater Management District, Kevin, so you have some sort of level of commitment to conservation in that respect, don't you?
Sure. I spent a lot of time on that board and water savings, working with the Quivira Wildlife Refuge issue with the impairment that they've claimed. And so we need to use the resource to make ourselves sustainable and profitable, but it has to be, we have to leave it better than when we got it. And I truly believe that it's a resource that God gave us to use, and we need to use it wisely.
Kevin and Vera Schultz of Edwards County there, part of the 2020 class of Kansas Master Farmers, Master Farm Homemakers. Tomorrow, the final profile for you, that of Ellis and Rita Yoder of McPherson County. You're tuned to Agriculture Today. Agriculture Today continues now. Eric Atkinson with you, and on we go to today's lead stories in agricultural news, courtesy in part of DTN. No less than 330 national and state farm and livestock organizations sent a letter to congressional leaders yesterday calling on lawmakers to, quote, not alter or eliminate long-standing tax code provisions that are fundamental to the financial health of production agriculture and related businesses. These farm groups spell out that they're firmly and ardently opposed to proposed changes in capital gains or stepped-up basis for heirs that Democrat leaders are considering using to pay for their new programs. The New York Times cited former North Dakota Senator Heidi Heitkamp, a Democrat, helping opposition to the president's tax plan. Heitkamp argues that the tax plans for capital gains would hurt the Democrat Party in rural America. Now, this letter included the American Farm Bureau Federation, National Cattlemen's Beef Association, along with state and national groups representing agribusinesses, corn, soybeans, milk, cotton, sorghum, and poultry producers, among many others. The letter cites that there are 4 times as many farmers and ranchers age 65 or older than there are under the age of 35, and that older farmers own more than 40% of agricultural land in the country, with 370 million acres Acres expected to change hands in the next 2 decades. The tax policies being debated by Congress, they say, quoting again, will determine agricultural producers' ability to secure affordable land to start or expand their operations. Now, the president's tax plan is calling for budget reconciliation that would tax unrealized capital gains at death at 43.4%, up from 23.8%. After including the Medicare surtax, that plan would exempt $1 million in assets for an individual, $2 million per couple, effectively repealing the stepped-up basis carryover that heirs receive from their estates. Now, in the debate over a stepped-up basis, the farm groups are stating that the transfer of farmland in family-owned operations would become more problematic if farmers had to determine the potential capital gains on farmland and other farm assets, rather than affording their heirs the traditional stepped-up basis that they've received when inheriting a farm or a business. Well, there'll be loads of new information on crop acreage and yields coming out tomorrow in the USDA's monthly grain supply and demand report. Here's a preview from the USDA's Gary Crawford.
Last month's USDA crop production report did have a yield forecast for the major crops, but
it was really just the farmer's best estimate of what the crop might produce.
But USDA Outlook Board Chairman Mark Jekanowski says this time USDA has sent out expert crop evaluators to thousands of field plots.
To actually look at the crop and get a much better sense of what the yields are and what we can expect for production.
And also, USDA Statistics Service has a process
where they look at data from the Farm Service Agency and from RMA and other sources, and they could tweak acreage a little bit based on that.
But that normally does not happen until October.
But this year, they feel that the data is already in pretty good shape to start analyzing it.
And so Jekanowski says
we could get some acreage adjustments along with the yield adjustments that we're expecting.
So lots of things to look for in USDA's new round of reports coming out this Friday, noon Eastern Time. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Hours of service requirements for livestock transportation has been extended through November the 30th. Sam Capone says that there are new reporting requirements that fall within this new declaration.
The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration has extended the exemption from hours of service requirements for livestock haulers through midnight on November 30th. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association consistently has advocated for this flexibility so haulers can ensure the well-being of livestock. Thanks in part to the National Cattlemen's Beef Association's persistence, livestock haulers have been operating under hours of service exemption since the beginning of the pandemic and have maintained a strong safety record. New with this extension is the requirement that motor carriers operating under its terms must report within 5 days after the end of each month that rely on the declaration. To report, carriers should log in with their Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration credentials on the fmcsa.dot.gov website. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration is trying to collect more data on who is using these exemptions to make decisions in the future. Finished livestock feed haulers also are included in this extension. I'm Sam Capone.
Now here's Greg Akagi with this week's Kansas Soybean Update. Greg?
Chip Redman is joining us. He is a Kansas State meteorologist. And Chip, there's a tool out there for farmers that can be very, very useful that you guys work with at Kansas State. It's the Kansas Mesonet and the Weather Data Library.
The Mesonet consists of 75 weather stations that are located throughout the state, pretty well spread out from the northwest to the southeast and really every corner. We collect data real time on that network, and producers can go on the website at Mesonet, that's mesonet.ksu.edu, and look at that data for free, both real time, and they can download historical data as well.
What are some of the data points that you guys provide?
Yeah, we provide all your general weather information. So precipitation's a really good one where people can go in, they can look at how much rain fell last night, and they can also go back and look how much rain has fallen over the last 3 months and compare it to normal. Then we measure things, that other simple parameters such as temperature, wind speed, wind direction, humidity. We also measure some agriculture parameters that aren't measured on any other network in the state. That includes soil moisture. We do have that at 4 depths at our stations, soil temperature, as well as solar radiation. So that allows us to be able to calculate evapotranspiration as well. So lots of agriculture-based tools and data or data and tools from that data available there.
Especially since we're coming up on soybean harvest, there's, of course, a lot of information, particular information that soybean farmer would want.
Yeah, we start to look at humidity when we get to that time of the year. How fast can it dry out? How many days do we have with low humidity? Helps that, as well as, we're not quite to that stage yet, but so we're looking at growing degrees still, where we need to accumulate some warmth to be able to get those soybeans, as well as moisture to get those soybeans to fill out.
And Chip, of course, we're talking about weather that has been occurring this year, but you can look back as well on weather trends.
So we can take like this fall or this late summer and go back and compare it to previous late summers and see how they compare, and look at yields, as well as what the weather was at that time, to kind of get an idea of analog years for this year.
Once again, if people want more information or would like to see what the Kansas Mesonet provides, what's that web address?
That's mesonet.ksu.edu.
Chip, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is Chip Redmond, Kansas State University meteorologist, who joins us on the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission.
Thanks, Greg. And this is Agriculture Today. Welcome back to Agriculture Today, and around to time for our horticulture feature for this week. And we'll preview once more another of those K-State Garden Hour webinars, which is set for this coming Wednesday, the 15th of September. If you take that webinar in, you'll be introduced to a likely new term to you, vermicomposting. Defining that for us right here, Scott Eckert. Scott is the Harvey County Extension horticulture agent and the presenter of that forthcoming webinar. Well, Scott, we know a little bit about what composting is in garden venues, but what is vermicomposting?
Vermicomposting is using worms to break down organic matter, such as banana peels and apple cores, things like that, into an organic soil amendment that helps enrich the soil and loosen soil, but you're using worms to do this work.
And worms are a function of nature that most folks are familiar with when we think about soil health. But this is an opportunity to create compost year-round, you say?
Yeah. You have a worm that doesn't like cold temperatures, and this is the composting worm that's used in vermicomposting. Red wiggler is a common name, or manure worm. The genus and species is Icena fetida. Not that you need to know that, but it is a different worm than our familiar night crawler or earthworms. They are suited to the indoor, shallow bin environment that you find in the kitchen or in an office or maybe even a utility room at home.
Well, before we talk of how one can make this happen, how one would utilize vermicomposting in a similar fashion to any other form of compost?
Yes, it's very similar. It's just different in how it's formed or made. You can use it directly as you are planting, like transplants in the spring, or work it in around house plants in containers. If you have enough, of course, if you plant trees and shrubs, you can use it in that fashion as well as you're putting soil back into the ground. A lot of people will use worm castings, which is the end product of vermicomposting. They use that with a lot of seed starting trays and vegetables, flowers, really about anything you plant can utilize the castings from vermicomposting.
During this webinar upcoming, you'll be going step by step through how to create this form of compost. But if you would, in our time today, Scott, offer the basics here of how one gets going in this process.
Okay. You need a bin or container to house the worms, and you need bedding for those. So a bin can be as simple as a tote that you go to a department store or hardware store to find. They're, $8, $10, $12. You drill a series of holes in the tote, and your bedding, I typically use newspaper, and I know a lot of people don't get newspapers anymore, but it makes a really nice, inexpensive bedding that you need to keep moist for for them to live in. And since they don't burrow deep like an earthworm will, an earthworm will go 10 feet down. These worms tend to stay within the top, 6 or 8 inches. That's why a tote works well. And you wet the bedding, moisten the bedding, wring it out, and then when you go to feed them, you bury the food, the scraps, a little bit, an inch or two down underneath the bedding when you feed them. So it works. It's a small, confined area, and what's funny is the worms I started with 18 years ago, I still have that going.
Where does one get these specific worms then?
Good question. It's easy just to go online and Google composting worms or vermicomposting, and you'll see all kinds of sites for purchasing composting worms.
And once one establishes one of these bins with these worms at work, do they require, outside of feeding them, much management? We turn conventional compost. We don't do that here.
No, you want to check them. Well, you want to feed them regularly. And when they have eaten all or most of their bedding, that's when you need to harvest the castings and kind of start a new bin with new bedding from the same worms. The black gold, or the real value here, is the castings they produce. So you harvest that and then have that to use in your plants, and you take the worms, and I'll explain this more in the program, but you have the worms left over from the one you just harvested castings from to start a new bin.
And you've mentioned food scraps work great for this purpose, but even residual from the lawn itself or the garden can be utilized in this way too.
I would caution you on anything that has been sprayed with either an herbicide or fungicide, insecticide. I don't use grass. I use potato peels, and you can feed them old spaghetti, like pasta, cereal, and they like lettuce, and they like fruit. Those are the kind of things in the wintertime you're going to likely have versus, of course, grass clippings.
Right. Well, you will be outlining this in much further detail. It's an intriguing concept in this webinar upcoming on the 15th, this coming Wednesday. It's a noontime program, and it's free for anybody to take it in. Remind us how folks can take part in this.
You should be able to just Google the K-State Garden Hour. You have to register.
Need to register, and again, search for K-State Garden Hour, and you'll find all the particulars on that. But what Scott will be highlighting again during that session will be vermicomposting, the use of designated, if you will, worms that do a great job of turning normal garbage from the home into compost material. You can learn more about it at this webinar. Best of luck with it, Scott. Thank you for giving us a quick glimpse to this topic today.
Thank you.
He's Scott Eckert, Harvey County Extension horticulture agent, and he'll be the lead presenter on that webinar coming up over the noon hour this coming Wednesday, September the 15th. Take that in. That is this week's horticulture segment, capping off our Thursday edition. Before we go, again, if you haven't taken advantage of our podcast service, we'd invite you to do so. Visit agtoday.net, and you can listen to each day's broadcast posted right there at your leisure, or you can subscribe to the automatic download of same to your mobile device. Look into it at agtoday.net. And thanks for tuning in right here today. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.